Hey guys, welcome to another weekly workshop. We are here inside the ECX scooter shop. Got a handful of things to do. We got to pack a couple orders for the online site, but we've also been getting a lot of questions again about people needing help choosing what kind of deck they want online. When you walk into the store, it's a little bit easier to just kind of talk out all the different options and choices, but when you're going on the website, it's a lot of reading, a lot of back and forth. So I'm hoping that this video will kind of recap the main topics when we're talking about what size deck we should choose. Most riders are going to define decks as either street or park. Being a rider-owned shop for such a long time, that's not really a terminology that we like to use as far as choosing what product you should ride. And there's obviously a distinction between when somebody is riding mostly at the skate park versus somebody that's riding mostly street riding. They're going to obviously want different size and style parts. However, like me for example, if I'm going to be riding mostly at the skate park, just because I'm a full-grown adult and I like to do certain styles of tricks, I'm still going to ride a very wide and long boxed out deck, even though I'm riding mostly at the skate park. It's not that I'm riding a street deck in the skate park. No, it's that I'm riding a deck that fits my style of riding, fits my physical size, it fits everything that I want styling-wise, it works with the kind of tricks that I want to get into, and so it makes sense for me as a rider. I'm not eliminating a whole sector of decks just because I happen to ride at the skate park more often than I ride street, because that's not the best, most beneficial way to look at it when it comes to the biggest bang for your buck money-wise, and as far as choosing something that's really going to excel your riding to the next level and help you out. And more so than that, what's most important when choosing out a scooter product is what you're going to have the most fun with. Because you don't want to choose something because this guy at the skate park or this guy at the spot said you need it or want it or whatever, or this YouTuber said this. You need to choose something that's going to fit with what you want to learn and what you want to ride. So when somebody is describing a park deck, generally what they're saying is that it's skinnier, it's shorter, and often they mean that it has a cut back end, or essentially non-boxed ends. The reason somebody would call this park is that if you're going and you're doing a lot of air tricks, for example, boxed ends can sometimes get in the way if you don't land perfectly straight or even. So that angled back end can greatly help if you don't land perfectly clean when you're coming down in air. So let's say you're doing a buttercup air, for example. You're gonna kind of come more at an angle compared to if you're riding a ledge at a street spot, you're for the most part going in a straight line. And if you come around, even if you're doing a trick out of a grind or something on a grind box, you're not gonna necessarily be landing sideways. And so more surface area with a boxed end deck can be more beneficial for that. So it's not necessarily that you can't ride this at a street spot, it's just that a deck with boxed ends is going to have a little bit more benefit to that style of tricks or that style of riding. So this Erewhon deck, for example, is under 20 inches long, it's under 5 inches wide, and it's relatively really lightweight, being under 3 pounds. All that said, this is going to be a really popular deck for somebody that is mostly going to be riding at the skate park. The reason for that is that if they're coming up in the air and trying to do aerial style tricks, the lighter weight, the smaller size is all going to be beneficial for that style of riding. However, if you're a bigger rider, like me for example, even if you're doing that kind of trick at the skate park, you're still going to need something that makes sense for your physical size. Now, you might not want this north deck, for example. However, you might still want something that is wider just to be able to fit you, because a full-grown adult on a small deck, even if it's a park style, you're not going to have a good time. But there's plenty of decks in between. The Vulcan deck, for example, is still relatively small. It has the non-boxed end, so it's cut back, which is really great for air tricks. But in addition to that, it's over 5 inches wide, so it gives you a little bit more stability on grinds and stalls and in general for your feet. But then it's also still going to give you a relatively lightweight feel for your overall scooter. Now, a lot of riders think that most street style decks are going to be better against curbs. The thing is that every single deck on the market is currently made out of aluminum, and aluminum is a relatively soft metal. So no matter what deck you go with, you're gonna wear out the bottom if you're grinding on curbs like crazy. So always keep that in mind. Large decks like this North here, oftentimes will purposefully have added weight in different areas to benefit different styles. So if you're doing a lot of nose manuals or balance tricks, this North deck purposely has a lot of weight up in the front. This one makes sure that you're not making the deck super weak, but two, you're making it to where it has a balance point that most riders are really gonna vibe with. So if you plan to be riding at the skate park mostly, if you want to do multiple whips, overhead tricks, stuff like that, a non-box deck can provide a little bit more benefit if you're not planning on doing grinds and stalls. The reason for this is that it's often going to be lighter weight, a little bit easier to whip above your head and whatnot. And also too, a non-box deck, there's less going on in the back, so you usually save a little bit of money. A good example is the Epic Vulcan is available in non-boxed and boxed. The non-boxed retails at $145, and the box version is a little bit more at $160. So you can save a little bit of money if you don't need that little bit of extra. But again too, there is plenty of decks that fall kind of in between the main categories that you guys like to choose of street versus park. The Aztec Hydra deck, for example, is still a super lightweight deck that competes with some of the other non-box decks on the market. Like for example, this is about 3 pounds. That's identical to a Fusion 5-wide non-box deck, but this has the boxed ends with metal boxed end inserts thanks to its design. So if you're gonna be riding at the skate park a lot, yet you still want some added benefit of extra surface area in the back to help lock into different grinds and stalls, the Hydra's a good choice. Because then, when you're popping out a box or coping, you can kind of hit that, tail whip out or bar spin out a little bit better. Scootering is all about having fun and self-expression. So you should never limit yourself to only ride park or only ride street just because your friend said this or your friend said that about your T-bars or your box deck. Ride anything you want, anywhere. You should be able to just have fun, get out there, get riding, but clearly there is a distinction of if your riding fits one style, then there's parts that can also match with that. But on our site, we give you all the different details like the weight, head tube angles, the length of the deck, the wheelbase, the foot room. We give it all to you so that you as the rider can absorb that info and make the best decision for your riding style and what you want to do. But you shouldn't just look at, am I street or am I park? You should look at what weights are beneficial to me, what wheelbase is going to be beneficial to me, what kind of tricks am I really trying to do? Do I want to learn stalls? Do I want to learn grinds? You have to look into everything and then make a decision that way. So always feel free to reach out. We're big on customer service, so if you ever have any questions, shoot us a message, give us a call, and we're always happy to help. So let's dive in deeper and look at these 3 very different size and style decks and compare them. Alright, so we have lined up where the weld ends on the bottom of the down tube on each one of these decks. The reason that is where we decided to line them up is because that's going to give us our best comparison to look at the differences in these decks. Because nobody stands with their feet in the back or the front up in these tips. So our foot space, we're going to measure from there to there. It's the general area we have to stand on. And if you really wanted to, you could do, the width times that length and figure out your square inch of foot space. But generally, we kind of just talk about the length because then the width can be discussed later. So these 3 decks are measuring out at 22, about 21 and a half, and then the 19 and a half. And yet their foot spaces are only ranging from 14 and a half to 14 to 13 and a half. So regardless of the fact that it's 2.5 inches of length difference, we're only talking about 1 inch of foot space difference. And that's not even to mention our overall wheelbase. This Wise deck being 22 inches long, thanks to the large down tube, we have over 25 inches of wheelbase compared to the Vulcan, which is at 24. And this Fusion 19.5 inch long deck has only a 22 inch wheelbase. And so you have a very small wheelbase with a relatively large foot space in comparison to the rest of the dimension. And so the Fusion deck is very, very lightweight, very small, and yet given that size, you have a decent amount of room on top compared to other smaller decks. And the same thing goes for this Wise deck. Although it's very long at 22 inches with a large, comfy wheelbase over 25 inches, you still only have about 14.5 inches of foot room, which for a deck of that size is relatively small compared to some other options. The reason that wheelbase is important is because we can look at how much foot space we have compared to the overall deck length compared to the overall wheelbase. Those dimensions in comparison to each other is going to let us know what the deck is going to feel like. Because if we have a long deck with a very similar wheelbase, then it's going to feel very pinched up. Your bars are going to be close to your body, as opposed to if you have a bigger variation between the length of the deck and the wheelbase, then the bars are going to be further away from your body. The angle of the head tube also has a big effect here, especially when we're looking at, if you have this Fusion deck, you're generally going to have only like 18 to 24 inch tall bars on that. Compared to this Wise deck, we're gonna be looking at bigger, taller riders, so that can range anywhere from like 20 up to 30 inches tall. And if you have a steeper head tube angle, that half a degree or that 1.5 degree of head tube angle is gonna have a bigger effect the taller our bars go. So if you're riding all the way up at 28 to 30 inch tall bars, you really need to be looking into what head tube angle am I getting, and is that going to feel good for what I am expecting out of my scooter. I hope this video can help when you're looking into what deck you should choose next. And again, if you ever have any questions, shoot us a message or give us a call, and we're always happy to help and explain anything that we can.